for me has been my solace and my salvation for more than 50 years. Wow, that's half a century, I've suddenly realised. Art has been my life in many ways. I have been a collector, a creator, and a student of art, literally all my life. When I was a young man, as a teenager, I went to Europe, hitchhiked my way to Europe, to visit the great galleries and the great artworks of the Renaissance, the High Renaissance, and look at the true masters of art, the great artists that everyone in the art world and everyone interested in art can just admire the skill of it, the talent of it, the wonder of it all. My own modest talents are light years away from that. But art has been my salvation, often my solace. We all have dark periods in our life, and I've always withdrawn into my studio, my world of art. Nowadays, I spend all my time in the studio, and I love to paint every single day. But the fascination for me is to look at the story of art in many ways, literally from humankind. When we were cavemen, we wanted to paint, because every human being has creative talent somewhere in their system. I have to say that I'm as excited by a piece of work by a 6-year-old as a great master, because some of our young children can produce fantastic pieces of art. And that's the beauty of it. Of course, the area that I've really focused on for much of the last 20, 30 years is my fascination with abstract expressionist art and that genre, that movement. And when you go right back to the turn of the century and the foundations, you know, the great artists like Paul Klee, and of course the wonderful Kazimir Malevich, the great Russian painter who really changed art for all time with his famous black square, and the movement that he called suprematism, the supremacy of art and shape and colour, geometric shapes, and building on his own artistic experience. Really laying the foundations, as I say, together with artists like Paul Klee and Kandinsky, of course. Later for the purple patch, which would transcend through the next few decades into post-World War II explosion of abstract expressionist art in the New York School in America. And certainly from the 40s and 50s, abstract expressionist art and artists very much came into their own and became hugely collectible, and in many ways changed the face of art for all time. And when you look at the great names, of course, the great, there's so much going on in Europe just before the Second World War. During the war years, you got the great Hans Hofmann, who came from Germany, and he was a teacher as well as an abstract artist. And from Russia, of course, we had John D. Graham, another great teacher, and they headed for New York. And they joined with the likes of Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning, and the great Robert Motherwell, who's been an enormous influence on my own work. Robert Motherwell, of course, started life as a philosopher. He didn't have any great training as a formal artist, but he's a wonderful thinker. And when you want to let your emotions tell the story on canvas or on board, this is the marvellous thing about abstract painting. And you can express yourself via that style of painting. And for me, it's been my key influence. And there's no question that that movement, for me, is critically important. I know people say, well, it waned and it was overtaken by pop art and the Andy Warhols of this world and the Jean-Michel Bacharach, and everyone came on the scene in the later years. But for me, the storyline, for those who are interested in the abstract world of painting, the New York School for me is the embodiment of that movement. It was almost an anti-figurative aesthetic coming out of the European and the German schools, with Futurism and the Bauhaus, and of course the synthetic cubism, and also the great promoters of the abstract expressionist movement, Peggy Guggenheim, of course, when she opened her famous gallery in 1942 in New York. And she called it Art of This Century. And she was a great supporter, promoter, and sponsor of the likes of Jackson Pollock and Franz Klein and Mark Rothko, of course. And, of course, Robert Motherwell. Joan Mitchell, the great lady painter, who did wonderful impasto abstracts. And these huge canvases, I mean, obviously, many of the great abstract artists, like, look at Jackson Pollock's action paintings. They are huge, 15 feet by 12 feet. Robert Motherwell's great work, the Elegy to the Spanish Republic, number 110. I think that's 9 foot by just under 7 foot. So these huge canvases. And the fact that all the canvas was important for detail for the abstract artist. It wasn't just one focal point like in a figurative work. So, for me, art is about emotion and colour and form and shape. And as an abstract artist myself, as I say, I would recommend anyone to pick up a paintbrush and get a canvas. And if you want to really lose yourself with your imagination and your creative skill, of which I believe every human has a creative skill of some kind. And for me, as I say, art has been my solace. I remember in the last great crash of 2008, when I was wiped out, I think, virtually, certainly in the UK, wiped out financially. I think I ended up with about 39p in my pocket in the clothes I was standing up on. But I always retained my warehouse full of art. And I refused to sell any art. And I've always worked outside of the gallery system for a platform for selling and the auction house system. I've always worked outside. And of course, because I was involved in football for quite a period of my life, I never wanted to mix the art with that. I've been an artist long before I was ever involved in football. And that's why I used the pseudonym of KP. Simply stood for Kongthin Pearlmich. The media thought was a Chinese artist, when in fact it's just an anagram of Michael Knighton. So 13, 14 years ago, when I exhibited a piece at Cambridge University, which attracted a lot of attention. I remember the BBC trying to track the artist down. They flatteringly called it a masterpiece. Look, I would never call any of my work a masterpiece, but the BBC tried to track the artist down. Who is Kongthin Pearlmich? It's simply an anagram of my name, Michael Knighton, with the word pearl in, because one of my motifs and icons that I used in my work is a pearl. Nowadays, of course, I will use a pearl or butterfly or a bee. They're all significant to myself for reasons that I won't go into here. But no, art, as I say, it's been my solace, it's been my salvation, and now I paint every day, all day, when I can. And I'm thankful now that I've got the time to do what I enjoy more than anything in life. Of course, football will always be a passion, it is a great passion. But football's never saved my life, not like art has. So Michael Knighton, the artist, yep, I'm coming out. I'm coming out. And I'm revealing my identity. And I'm being hypocritical because I've been critical of the auction house system in the past, especially the big 3 or 4, because I think they've dictated the art world for long enough, and they've often sometimes even dictated fashion and buying fashions. Well, I'm coming out and I'm being hypocritical, forgive me, because I'm going to sell some of my own artwork through auction houses. I've had several gallerists approach me to put on exhibitions of my work, and I'm just filtering through those at the moment. So I will be using those two platforms now. And I'm doing it now because I reach the twilight of my life. I've got a lot shorter time left than I've had. And now it's time to get all my work out of the warehouse, all of my collection as I have been collecting for 50 years, as a collector, as a creator, and as a student. I'm still a student today. And as I say, I admire all artists, whether they be 6 years or 60. I admire all creative talent. And I hope people will enjoy, like I've enjoyed, the items that I've had in storage and collections and around my various homes. I hope people will enjoy them. And hopefully they will enjoy my own art. And I hope they will see it hanging on their walls in a few months' time. So that's briefly the story of Michael Knighton, the artist. What I want to mention just finally is the great exhibition, the 9th Street Art Exhibition, which really was the stepping stone and the coming out of abstract art in New York. Oddly enough, in May, the month we're in now, but in May 1951, so it's 70 years ago. And that was a fabulous exhibition which exhibited all the great names. Your Jackson Pollocks, your Martha Roscoes, your Robert Motherwells, your Franz Kleins, your Hans Hofmann, your Clifford Still, Joe Mitchell, Brooks. They were all there. And as I say, they became collectively known shortly after that exhibition as the New York School of Abstract Expressionism. And I'm still carrying on their tradition today.